But I was horrified that these people, these human beings, were being treated in a way that people wouldn't treat animals.
Welcome to the Silent Epidemic by Omnia Therapy, the podcast where we uncover the unspoken truths of mental health. There's a mental health crisis sweeping the nation, and we're here to discuss the aspects that often go unnoticed. I'm Hatice Mehmet-Quirk, a therapist, and each month I'll be speaking with leaders from various industries and disciplines. We'll explore how they tackle mental health both personally and professionally, offering valuable insights and advice. I am delighted to be joined by Kathryn Stone OBE. Kathryn is the chair of the Bar Standards Board, a position she has held since September 2022. Her impressive career includes roles such as Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards, Commissioner for Victims and Survivors in Northern Ireland, and Legal Ombudsman for England and Wales. Kathryn has been a champion of social justice and accountability throughout her career. Welcome to the show, Kathryn.
Thank you, and thank you for that very generous introduction. It might help you to know I didn't actually pass my cycling proficiency test. So it just goes to show you can have all the jobs you like, but if you can't be practical, you're in a bit of a pickle. But anyway, I'm delighted to be here.
Well, you've done very well with all of your achievements.
Thank you.
Yeah. You've had an extensive and varied career in social work, regulation, and now law. Can you share how you arrived at this point and your own experiences with mental health along this journey?
Okay, so I wish I could say I had a career plan. I didn't. My ambition when I was at school was it was a very naive, very optimistic ambition, and that was to help people. The school I went to was a very, you might say, hippie school. There were no rules. We called all the teachers by their first names. We didn't wear uniform. We didn't actually really have to go if we didn't want, which is fantastic when you're 15 and all you want to do is drink cider and smoke fags. Some people might want to do that, Hattie, obviously.
Not you,
no. But one of the things we absolutely had to do was community service. Now, this makes it sound like a borstal, but it wasn't. And I went with a minibus load of other students to the Derbyshire Miners holiday camp in Skegness. And a coach load of people with profound and complex learning difficulties arrived at this miners holiday camp. And we were expected to look after them. All the teachers had disappeared, the staff had disappeared. I mean, you would never, ever, ever be allowed to do that now. But I was horrified that these people, these human beings, were being treated in a way that people wouldn't treat animals. There were no beds, they slept on the floor. The clothes they wore came out of bin bags. It weren't their own clothes. It was just anybody's clothes. It was absolutely shocking and I think shameful. And I determined at that point that I wanted to do something about that. And I wanted to make sure that people weren't treated like, I just couldn't understand how this was allowed to happen. And at the time, I was living with a teacher. I didn't really get on with my family, and a teacher had taken me in. It's okay, everybody. It was a woman, and she and her husband took me in to live with them. And she persuaded me that in order to be of help, that I had to stay on at school and do qualifications, because by this time I was, my foot was out of the door and I was going to go and work in a factory. And she said, well, if you want to do something about that, you've got to get qualifications and you've got to. So I went back to school and scraped A-levels and then set off at the age of 17 to live in London and to do my degree and my social work qualification. And ultimately, I ended up running a charity for people with learning difficulties and who'd been victims of crime. So I fulfilled my ambition from being 15 much, much later. And one of the things I say, I think my children have kind of shut their ears to it now, is if you do anything in your life, make a difference. Make a difference to other people. The rest is noise and it really doesn't matter. So how to cope with all that, how to manage, it's undoubtedly incredibly stressful. Child protection, social work, being in Northern Ireland, being in Parliament, all incredibly stressful. But the resilience that you develop by having a purpose and a set of values that drive that mean that you do find ways of managing that. In fact, the most stressful job that I've ever had was being a warden in sheltered accommodation for older people. And it was in West London, and it was 1985, the year of Live Aid, because I invited these 60-odd older people who lived in flats in this block to come and watch Live Aid with me. And they loved it. But it was so stressful because it was my responsibility to make sure they were all okay. And I was acting as an agency worker, and I was told, well, just sit and watch telly, and if people want you, they'll ring you. But I didn't think that was okay. So I, spent my shifts knocking on people's doors, checking that they were okay, making sure that they were okay, and knowing that I was responsible for all those people. It really, really brings it home when you see other people who are vulnerable and fragile. Well, that might be me. That might be you. That might be somebody we love. And therefore, you step up and you take responsibility.
So it's almost that experience of 15 years old when you've gone and you've seen people living in circumstances that weren't nice at all. They weren't really being treated very well at all, were they?
No.
That sort of ignited this passion in you to say, I want to stop this sort of thing from happening. I want to make a difference. I want to help people. And then this teacher who inspired you to say, well, if you actually want to do that, then you need the qualifications to back that up. And it almost seems like begrudgingly at the time you thought, oh, okay, I'll go down that route. And then you got your A-levels and you came to London. You've said yourself that you've been in very stressful positions and, the various different jobs that you've had. But that passion has given you the resilience to coast through those stressful experiences.
I think coast might be a bit of a misnomer. I think some of them stagger through clinging on by my fingernails, but certainly it's that, this is what I'm doing here and this is why I'm doing it. And I think for all of us, if we can't answer the questions, who am I doing this for, why am I doing it, and what do I want the outcome to be, then we really shouldn't be doing it at all.
And really, in a way, that's a really simple way to keep ourselves grounded and keep reminding ourselves of what is the purpose and what is the reason and what am I gaining from it, what am I trying to achieve. Because life is so fast-paced these days, and actually you get dragged into so many different things that people can forget that just thinking about those three things can be the difference to get their head straight and get back in the game to deal with what they're facing.
It's absolutely true. And I do now, now that I'm older, I do have to work harder at stepping back from things and understanding that there are things that I can change and things I can't. And just understand that sometimes the best thing to do is nothing. We can't solve all the world's problems, so let's focus on the things that we can and try to do the best we can in that moment.
So again, you've learned as time's gone on to have that acceptance about what you can change and what you can't change. And it seems like there was a period where you was uncomfortable with that, and now you've come to that acceptance.
I think it's, you as a younger person, you really do have a fire to want to change everything and change it now. And when I see young people on demonstrations and they're, wanting whatever it is they want changed, and they want it changed now. And I think that's fantastic. And they speak with such a burning desire for things to be different. And I still feel that. But that desire is tempered by a reality that maybe to achieve that thing, we need to go about it in a slightly different way. All that stuff's great, but, nothing is going to change unless we do a number of other things as well.
Given your background in regulatory roles, how can regulations and policies be leveraged to promote mental health awareness and support within high-stress professions?
That's a really interesting question. And I think the answer to it lies mostly in the culture of the organisation and the preparedness of any organisation to accept that people are human and have all sorts of different levels of resilience, different levels of ability to manage a whole range of different things. Obviously, in terms of regulation, we can think about the standards that we set, that we expect employers, organisations to meet in order to promote healthy environments. We've got lots and lots of standards about health and safety and ladders and working at heights. We haven't got quite so many about how we support people with either acute or mental health, chronic mental health problems. So, maybe, and perhaps this is me being naive, we ought to have some industry standard in the same way that we think about people's physical safety, to think about people's mental health and their mental well-being, and how we create psychologically safe environments as well as physically safe environments for people to work in. And I think that would really help if there was a culture of openness and an ability to be authentic at work. Lots and lots of organisations have different workplace schemes, mental health first aiders or places where people can go for time out, or employee assistance programs. It's still quite a taboo thing to think about. And certainly in politics, in law, in medicine, you are expected to be mentally resilient and just able to deal with it. My time in Northern Ireland, I worked with a lot of police officers who had been police officers during the Troubles, and they would go to some absolutely horrific environments following a bomb blast or following something. And at the time, in the 70s and 80s, they were told to go back to the station, help themselves to what they wanted from the station bar, drink themselves silly and be back on duty the following day. That's really not helping anyone. Thankfully, the police and fire and rescue services are much more sophisticated than that now. I think other organisations have got a long way to go to match that. But the creation of psychologically safe environments, being seen to be, being held to account as being as safe as physically safe environments, would be a really good place to start.
Yeah, I quite like that. I've never sort of likened it to that, but it is true. Why is it that we have to be careful with wires hanging around, or as you say, ladders, to protect someone's physical well-being, when actually psychologically there is very little support, and there is still that stigma, especially doing the podcast with the guests that I've had on so far, there is still a stigma in coming forward to say, I'm struggling, or I've got this problem, can you help or can you support me? Because of that expectation to have that mental resilience to just cope.
Yeah. So, maybe that's the next campaign then. Psychological safety is as important as physical safety.
I like that idea. Can you share any initiatives or programs that you have been particularly successful in supporting mental health within organisations?
When I was the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards at the House of Commons, and this is absolutely nothing to do with my involvement at all. I was very much on the periphery of this. When the House of Commons set up the Independent Complaints and Grievance Scheme, it was about a practical process to support people to make complaints of bullying, harassment and sexual misconduct. Really, really important scheme. You know, the first in the world to have a kind of parliamentary scheme. And one of the things that came later was psychological and mental health support for people bringing complaints and for those who were subject of the complaints. And the House of Commons worked with my office, with the Independent Complaints and Grievance Scheme, with the House Health and Medical Services to provide proper emotional and mental health support for people who were parties to those complaints. And it made a very real difference to whether people felt strong enough to continue with their complaints or felt able to manage the process of being investigated. And, you know, making a complaint against someone who is in a position of power and authority, or being the person who is being complained about, are incredibly stressful, very profound things for the complainer. They're about thinking about how this person has been in a position of power and authority over you as your employer or the person who can help you with your career, and being the person who's the subject of the complaint. This might be the end of your career. So having that kind of psychological safety net was such an important part of that scheme. And I think it would be really, really important for any sector thinking about introducing a bullying, harassment and sexual misconduct scheme to think not only about what is the process we're going to introduce, how do people make a complaint, who investigates it, who delivers the sanction, is it adversarial, is it inquisitorial, how does it fit with the criminal justice system, for them to just take a step back and think about how do we support these people.
So you were part of quite a big thing at the time, the first of its kind, to come forward and say, okay, if you've got a complaint within the Parliament, you can come forward. But it's not just a complaint, we're also going to provide you with psychological support that you need to help you navigate that. Not just as the complainer, but if you've been, you know, if you party to this complaint, then you can have that support. Because it must be quite isolating to go through something like that. You know, who do you trust? Who can you lean on? Who can you support? Can you talk to your colleagues about it? You probably can't because of the processes and the practices. That then having that outside support can make such a big difference to that person's well-being throughout a very almost an already difficult situation.
That's right. And if you think about other sectors, so, you know, creative industries, if you think about health, if you think about policing, if you think about the military, you know, you just have to open the paper any day or look at the news and you'll find someone who has either been a whistleblower or who has complained about somebody in a position of trust and authority. You know, schools and what goes on in school, any school. People need to have that psychological safety net around them. Otherwise, very bad things can happen. And, you know, the very least that can happen is people withdraw their complaint or don't go any further forward. And the worst that can happen is people make decisions about taking their own life or attempting that. So for me, it's so important that anybody going through any of those processes has a psychological safety net. It's why the criminal justice system has victim support. You know, a huge national organisation that provides kind of practical and emotional support. It's why we have things like independent sexual violence advisors, independent domestic violence advisors, incredible services who stand with people when they're going through the very worst time of their life. And that's just made me remember when I left the charity that I ran for 11 years and went off to work in Northern Ireland. One of the things that we said frequently at the charity is, at the very worst time of their lives, the very least we can do is our very best. And they had that kind of engraved for me, because the people we supported were people with learning difficulties who'd been victims of sexual abuse and sex crime, and it was our job to do our best for them at the worst time of their life. So yeah, it's just so important to think not just about the process, but about the person.
Because also, when someone's in the midst of a big situation like that, without that outside support, without someone, as you said, standing by them, your thoughts can spiral, your approach can spiral. Having that person to lean on can almost keep a person grounded.
Yeah, and I've been with people as an ally, or as a counsellor, as a supporter, as a caseworker, who, when they're in the midst of whatever it is, people can lose perspective and they can lose all sense of kind of proportionality and reasonableness, and that person can just bring them back and say, it's okay. We don't need to think about that. Because sometimes the reality of an awful thing happening to you can be completely overwhelming. And people talk about, for example, being lost in grief. You know, they just lose themselves completely, or lost in trauma. And that very simple act of standing with someone and listening to them and just being with them, it is one of the most compassionate, humane things I think that any of us can do. And that's why, you know, people train as counsellors, as therapists, because they want to be able to give of themselves to support someone else come back to who they are. It's just such an important thing to do.
What advice would you give to young professionals entering the legal field regarding mental health and self-care?
Okay, so entering the legal field, it's hard. It's very hard. But from speaking with colleagues and friends, it's hugely rewarding in terms of the difference that you can make. And it's something that isn't something that you do, it's who you are. So your identity becomes, as a barrister, as a solicitor, as a paralegal, as a legal executive. And one of the things that's been really important for me to think about, what advice would I give to my younger self, has been to not let compliments and praise go to my head, and criticism and condemnation go to my heart. You know, it would be so easy for when people say nice things, for you to, you know, kind of lose all proportion. But also when people say unpleasant or unkind things, for that to have a disproportionately wounding effect. And you'll be aware that I've had quite a bit of challenge, particularly when I was Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards. People wrote terrible things about my appearance and where I'm from and where I grew up and where I went to school. And all of it was designed really to make me give up and go away and not focus my attention on the conduct of politicians who were breaking the rules, breaching the code of conduct. Obviously, they hadn't appreciated that it just made me more determined. I was never going to go away.
That must have been tough to navigate. And as you said, you've had that foresight to think, actually, no, I'm not going to let that wound me. I've seen what the tactic is. You're trying to quieten me down and make me go away, but I'm not going to go away. I'm going to, going to point out what the failings are, what the issue is here. I think they underestimated you, I think. And again, that's from what you said earlier. That's a passion that was sort of come about from being taught at a very young age that it's not wrong to speak up when something
really isn't wrong. And also, none of us are better than anyone else. If you truly, truly believe that we are all equal, then what each of us have to say is as important as what somebody else has to say. And actually, it was my job. It's what I was being paid to do. And the fact that it was unpopular didn't really make a difference because it was my job to do it. And sometimes we have to do difficult things and make difficult and unpopular decisions, but that was my job.
So really, that's something that a lot of people can adopt within everyday life, isn't it? That understanding that if you are going to take on a role that, as you say, could lead to unpopular decisions or put you in an unpopular viewpoint amongst fellow employees, colleagues, you're doing that job for a reason. You chose to do that job for a reason. So don't let the views of others deter you from doing that job.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I think, now going back to the point we made about social media, it must be really, really hard to be a young person now, to have people almost delivering a running commentary on you, your appearance, your performance at school, your sporting prowess, and having to scroll through that all the time. And sometimes you just have to drown out the noise. You just don't listen to the noise. Focus on what you're going to do and go and do that. We see it with athletes, don't we? They're so focused and so determined and so driven to achieve good things. And, I was reading about a number of athletes and how they've set up these kind of decompression coaches so that when they come back from the Olympics, they've got people to talk to because they've spent their entire life, not just the past 6 months, but their entire life getting themselves to a point where it's this occasion and this one only. And if it goes well, how do you come down from the high of that? And if it doesn't go well, how do you cope with all that effort and all that, your parents getting up at 4 a.m. and training every day, Christmas Day, not going to birthdays, not going out, having fun with your friends, but a relentless pursuit of excellence, and it hasn't gone the way you want it to go. So again, we can learn from what's happening in the fields of sport and translate that across. Children and young people will be getting their exam results soon. How do we support them when they get their exam results? All of it is intertwined, and it's about how we look after each other, I think.
It's funny because when you just said that about young people and social media, and it reminded me of when my daughter, she was about 15, she was struggling with her anxiety. And she was of the age where the phone was constantly in her hand and she's constantly scrolling. And I had to make that unpopular decision to put a limit in place and say to her, you can't be on social media past this point every evening. I didn't mind if she was watching TV, but that constant scrolling.
Doom scrolling.
Yeah. And I had to, she didn't like it. I gave her 2 weeks. I said, you've got 2 weeks to put in place this time deadline that I'm giving you. If you don't do it by yourself, then unfortunately I'm going to have to take the phone away from you. Twice in that 2 weeks, I caught her out when past the time, and I had to reaffirm and just say, you know, you've got 2 weeks. The minute she followed the lead of cutting off, I think it was 10 o'clock, which was quite late anyway for someone that's going to get up and go to school. But I thought I'll meet her in the middle because I knew that the kids were on the phones till 12, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Within a month, she was like a completely different child. She didn't like me for it at the time.
But that's what parenting is, isn't it? Making difficult decisions.
Exactly. But unfortunately, I think people get stuck in this idea that, oh, everyone's doing it. They're all doing the same thing. But at the same time, we need to take control of that as parents to stop them doing the thing that's harming them.
Well, that's what responsible parenting is, isn't it? It's giving our children the tools to manage themselves. And, you know, I'm absolutely confident that at some point your daughter's going to say something and she'll hear you coming out. I know it's happened to me a few times. I've said something and thought, oh my goodness, that was my mum. But, there you go.
Yeah. Throughout your career, especially in roles like Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards and Legal Ombudsman, you must have encountered various forms of professional misconduct. Can you share any experience or insights on how bullying manifests in high-pressure environments?
Well, quite a lot of the reports that I've written about incidents of bullying and harassment, including sexual harassment, in different fields are in the public domain. And, you know, environments where people have worked very, very hard to become members of parliament, lawyers, doctors, you know, sports people, are very high pressured, and the focus is on achievement. And one of the things that I have found fascinating is that if you look, there is no need ever to raise your voice, to scream and shout at somebody. Absolutely no need ever. The people who command the greatest respect, in my experience, are people who use soft power, people who are very quietly spoken and who command respect by their behaviour, by their conduct, the way they conduct themselves. And, you know, if you think about, for example, a barrister in court, a barrister in court will never raise their voice or shout or scream. It's the way they ask the questions, always respectfully, but always very, very carefully. And I have the most enormous respect for anybody in any profession because they've had to work incredibly hard to get there. I have to say, I have the most enormous respect for anybody who does a trade. You know, if we see, I think we need to get back to a time where we're respectful of people who do jobs with their hands, people who make things or clean things or build things or, you know, these are all incredibly important jobs. Because I have to say, if your water tank leaks, you're not going to call a barrister, are you? You need a plumber quite quickly. So we need to get back to a time when we're respectful of people who are able to do all those things for us too. So it's the high pressure environment, it's the stress of the environment that causes people to occasionally behave badly. And there are those who behave badly anyway, and it doesn't matter what profession they're in. But that's why we need regulation. That's why we need codes of conduct to set a framework in the way that you described for your daughter. That's the code of that's the code of conduct. 10 o'clock. That's it. That's the framework. That's how I expect you to manage yourself. And those are the frameworks that we should be setting for all professions, so that people do feel safe, respected, valued when they work in them.
The Bar Standards Board has a significant role in regulating the profession. How does the BSB handle complaints of bullying, and what measures are in place to protect individuals who report such behaviour?
So we have a very clear process of investigating any allegations of bullying and harassment at the bar. And that process does include, I'm very pleased to say, psychological support and a very careful, very attentive understanding of the needs and requirements of the person making the complaint. We are equally cautious, careful about how we support those people who are the subjects of complaints. And it's really, really important that we do that. People need to feel that they are being listened to and understood when they're making a complaint. Because if not, they might not feel that they can continue with it, or it's too difficult, or it's too emotionally demanding. And we need to be able to build trust and confidence that people know that if they come forward, they will be listened to and they will be properly supported to make sure that the allegation, the investigation, we achieve the right outcome, whatever that might be.
So it almost sounds like you offer the support, you offer the safe space for them to explore it, you hold their hand through the process. So the person that comes through that's complaining doesn't feel like they're penalised because they're making this complaint. They feel supported in the process.
It's really important that people feel that they're going to be listened to and their complaints are going to be taken seriously. If they don't feel that, or they don't have a perception that that might happen, they won't do it. They won't have any trust and confidence in the process at all. And why would they?
Each episode, I like to share a particular topic around mental health and offer some useful and actionable advice for the listeners. Sleep is such an important part of maintaining good mental health, especially when managing a fast-paced career. It is proven that good sleep hygiene helps individuals to thrive, attention span is improved, as well as reducing stress levels. How can someone implement good habits to wake up and feel refreshed? Make sleep a priority. Even when life gets busy, it's important not to sacrifice sleep. Practice sleep hygiene, exercise regularly, avoid caffeine at night, power down electronics an hour before bedtime, and do a calming activity, reading a book or journaling before going to bed. Stay on schedule. Though it's tempting to sleep in, keep a consistent bedtime and wake-up time, even on weekends. Not doing so has been linked to almost cause jet lag, as it disturbs our normal sleep routines. Wake up to good music or a pleasant alarm sound. Research has shown it is better to wake up to sounds that make you feel good rather than startled. Don't hit snooze, let in natural light. Getting some sunshine in the morning will help you feel more awake. Open the curtains before you go to bed, or step outside for a few minutes before starting your morning routine. This has so many mental health benefits and is a great grounding exercise to start your day right. Make your mornings pleasant. Wake up earlier. Waking up earlier may be one of the keys to waking up better. Having more time will let you move more calmly and peacefully through your morning rather than rushing. This will set you up well for the day. Have something to look forward to. Find something that will motivate you to get up and get going in the morning. It might be as simple as a good cup of coffee or a new podcast, like the Silent Epidemic, for your morning routine. Eat a good breakfast. Consistently eating a healthy breakfast can help you feel more alert in the mornings and may even put you in a better mood. Kathryn, how does all that sound to you? How much of that do you do?
Oh, I'm hopeless.
Oh no.
Absolutely. As you were reading it, I was thinking, oh dear, oh please don't ask me, please don't ask me. So I have been a dreadful insomniac all my life. And sometimes sleep 3-4 hours a night. And I know that needs to get better. But I think some people just don't sleep a lot. And I might be one of the people who just really doesn't sleep a lot. But I have got much better at understanding I need to switch off. And so sleeping might not be my way of switching off, but certainly fussing over my plants, thinking about my garden. And during the winter, I'm a real home bird. So fussing over my home. We've got more cushions than you can shake a stick at. And every time I go out in the winter, I seem to come home with a new cushion. In the summer, I come home with a new plant. In the winter, it's a cushion. But it's my sanctuary. It's my safety. It's where I feel comfortable, and you can come to no harm with a cushion.
So it's almost like that cushion is your comfort in the winter.
You know, it's the colour of it and where it fits, and I like absolutely crappy magazines as well. I can lose I don't read magazines about celebrities because I've got no idea who any of them are. I mean, it's just, you know, they might as well be from Mars for all I know. But I've been reading Vogue since I was about 15, and I like to get lost in all that. I spent a lot of time at the V&A when the Chanel exhibition was on and the Dior exhibition was on, because for me, clothes are like sculpture, and I think there's a massive underestimation of what clothes mean to people, and a snobbery about it. And actually, some of those things are so beautiful and so clever. We should admire them for what they are, rather than, you know, the fact it's not a sculpture or a painting. If it's something beautiful, it's something beautiful.
Nice. We like to end by asking every guest, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I guess it's what I said earlier, really, and it's, you know, don't let praise and compliments go to your head, or criticism and condemnation go to your heart. It's just about understanding that there's a balance in all things, and you know, all that praise and compliments is great, but you need to balance that out and keep it real, really.
Thank you for listening to The Silent Epidemic. A special thanks to our guest Kathryn Stone for sharing her valuable insights and experiences. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to like, share and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. This is The Silent Epidemic, and we'll see you next time.